Welcome to our Two Witnesses broadcast. I'm Sean, and this is my good friend Pat. We really appreciate all of our viewers and subscribers, and we want you to know this, that Two Witnesses is all about sharing biblical content, prophetic insights for victorious last days living. So let's get started. Pat, what are we talking about today?
Today this is the third installment of When Ministers Fall.
When ministers fall, this is really important. And I know some of our viewers that are listening, they might be thinking, well, I don't know if that applies to me. But actually it does. It applies to all of us. So whether you're an Ephesians 4:11 fivefold ministry gift or a believer in the body,
Correct.
2 Corinthians 5 says that we've all been given the ministry of reconciliation to share the ministry of the word. So we all have a ministry. Pat, I think you had something you wanted to share here.
Basically this, we need to stress how it is important that we have the father's heart in this matter, not the elder brother, the accuser, and the
Story of the prodigal.
The prodigal, yeah. Come up with the word. The parable of the prodigal son. Okay, there was the elder brother involved, and he got all upset because there was forgiveness from the father, and he said, well, why is he getting all this special treatment? Basically, I'm paraphrasing. Why is he getting all of a special party and all this when I've been with you the whole time? I never left your side.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we're not in that role when we're discussing this kind of thing. And when we're having to watch this kind of thing happen, we need to guard our hearts against being that elder brother.
Amen. Well, to your point, the heart of the Father is so important, especially when you're dealing with ministers that fall.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have time to really get deeper into that subject right now, but sometime in the future, we'll get into that a little bit more and share about it. I also want to say this real quick up front. Pat and I are not sitting in a seat of judgment here. That's not what we're doing about this series on When Ministers Fall. We're also not putting ourselves up to be the authorities on this subject. We are not. We're just simply sharing what we've learned over the years by life experience and studying the Word, being in different settings, what we believe is helpful. And we also talked about we're taking a threefold approach on this. So the first part of this, we talked about how do you walk through a situation where a minister has fallen. And you can get the previous broadcast on that. We covered 4 things on that. Number 1, keep your eyes on Jesus. Number 2, take a posture of prayer for everybody that's involved. Mm-hmm. Number 3, walk in love. And number 4, if you judge righteously.
Right.
And there's some content there you can learn about that if you'd like to find out more about it. The second part of this we're talking about is what is the restoration process for a minister when they fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're into right now. We're going to take the next few broadcasts to kind of open that up. We're going to be looking at the life of King David and King Saul in the Old Testament, kind of be doing a little compare and contrast between the two of them. And let me just say this also, Pat and I have talked about this. We both believe strongly that we're in a season right now where there is judgment in the house of God. So we've seen a lot of that in 2024. We just entered into 2025, and we expect to see more of it. And we want to say this, we're not rooting for that. We're not praying for that. We're not wanting that to happen. That's not our heart at all. We just believe that the Lord has shown us there's more yet to come. And so for that reason, that's why we're doing this. There's a wise man said many years ago, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So that's all we're trying to do here is share with you what we believe will be helpful for walking through these seasons. So let's move on now. And we're going to talk about, as I said a minute ago, the life of King David. And we're going to see about the first 2 steps in this restoration process as it applies to his life. And the first 2 steps are personal responsibility and personal accountability. So when somebody falls, when a minister misses the mark, when a minister goes off, into sin, what is the process for that person to come back and to be restored in the relationship and or their function? And so the first things we're going to look at here are personal responsibility and personal accountability. I believe, Pat, you had 1 Samuel 13.
Yes, 1 Samuel 13, verses 5 through 15. I'm going to read that. And I'm reading different today. I'm not reading out of the Amplified, because if we try to do all this in the Amplified, it is going to be so long. It's crazy. Lengthy. So we're going to shorten it down by going with the New King James. So we'll start pick it up with the first verse. The fifth verse. Then the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and men as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. That's a lot of people.
It is. It is.
And they came up and encamped in Mishmash to the east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, then the people hid in caves, in thickets, and rocks, in holes, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Then he waited 7 days, according to the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul said, "Bring a burnt offering and peace offerings here to me." And he offered the burnt offering. Now it happened as soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering that Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might greet him. And Samuel said, "What have you done?" Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered together at Mishmash, then I said, the Philistines will now come down on me at Gilgal, and I have not made supplication to the Lord. Therefore I felt compelled and offered a burnt offering." And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, for now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." Then Samuel rose, went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin, and Saul numbered the men present with him about 600 men.
It's quite a story.
Yes, it is.
And this is kind of what we're seeing here is the beginning of Saul's fall, right? His failure of leadership. And, there's a lot of things that we can look at in here, Pat, but right away, one of the things that stands out to me, the people were fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Saul felt that. He was definitely moved emotionally because of the fear that the people were dealing with.
Right.
And rather than holding his ground and waiting, because Saul knew what the protocol was when it came to offering sacrifices before going into battle.
Right.
And when you look at when he was first anointed, he actually met Samuel, and Samuel told him to meet him at a high place where he was offering a sacrifice. And he was told to wait until Samuel came. So Saul was very much aware that it was the responsibility of the prophet to offer the sacrifice. So here we see him intruding into an office that he's not called into.
Correct.
And there's a lot more we can say about this, but you see a compromise here. Him thinking, well, I know technically Samuel should do this, but, we're kind of in a tight spot. The Philistines have come out against us and the people are scattered and, I got to make something happen here. And so there's the pressure of the situation.
Right.
It caused him to compromise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And when you compromise, you lose.
Well, to what you're saying there, it also gives us an insight into Saul's insecurity within himself.
Yeah.
As far as, because he didn't step up, that was the time for the leadership to step up.
Yeah.
The leadership that was in him to step up, and he didn't.
Yeah, it's very true. Here's another thing I think that's important. Samuel was the spiritual authority that God had appointed in Saul's life. And so by not honoring Samuel, he was really dishonoring the Lord.
Right.
And maybe he didn't realize that at the time, but he should have, because Samuel's the one that actually anointed him and gave him the word that God had raised him up to be the king of Israel.
Yeah.
So, I think one thing to look at here is when we get out of alignment with spiritual authorities, we're setting ourselves up for a fall.
Yeah, for sure.
So another thing here, Saul did wait. He just didn't wait until Samuel showed up. So he did wait the number of days, but he didn't wait until Samuel showed up and actually gave the offering. So what does that tell us? That's a partial obedience,
right?
Which is,
well, it reminds me, which is disobedience.
Which is
right?
disobedience.
Okay, and that reminds me of Abram's situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he tried to make something happen.
Yeah.
In the flesh.
Yeah.
Like Saul did here.
Yeah.
Okay, and we see how that wound up.
It didn't work out so well.
Didn't work out well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and a lot of times we just get ahead of things. Yeah. Because we are feeling pressure. Well, we got to make this happen. We got to do something. Yeah. God forbid that there's too much, dead space where nothing seems to be happening.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is something I run into all the time is people, are scared to death of quiet.
Right.
Especially ministers.
Yeah.
How many times have you been in a ministry? I know this is off subject. How many times have you been in a service where God's moving and somebody decides, well, somebody's got to get up and say something.
Yeah.
Right?
Many times.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better just to wait, give the space, see what God does. Yeah. If Saul had done that, Saul. If he had done that, this would have been a whole different story.
Well, I think he was on the verge of a miracle is what he was on. Yeah. Because he was getting ready to have the prophet that God had appointed. Really, Samuel was known as the prophet from, the northern kingdom to the southern kingdom. Mm-hmm. So he was like the senior prophet of the nation.
Right.
And he, for whatever reason, he delayed his coming. But when he showed up, everything would have shifted. Mm-hmm. If Saul would have just stayed in alignment, because he was going to carry out his job, his function, and he would set something into motion that would allow Saul to gather the people together, break the spirit of fear off of them, and go into battle and do what God sent him to do. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But he gets into fear, to your point a minute ago, and to your point also, the immaturity, right? Mm-hmm. And this was a test of leadership, and unfortunately, Saul failed this test. Yeah. And this was the beginning of his downfall. There's a lot more we can say about this. Ultimately, what it says is that Saul rejected the word of the Lord. Yeah. And, I think it's something we should consider here, that God actually took it personal. Mm-hmm. That Saul didn't realize, hey, you're not just rejecting Samuel. You're rejecting the Lord. Yeah. And specifically the word of the Lord, that God specifically spoke to you through his spokesman, his representative.
See, to what you're saying there, most people don't realize you can't separate God from his word.
Yeah.
They're tied together.
Absolutely.
Eternally tied together.
Yeah.
You reject him, you're going to reject the word. It's the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more things on this before we move on. So what we see here is Saul never really accepted full responsibility for his actions. Because you notice what it says here at the end, after he'd gotten, the word of the Lord and how God said, your kingdom would have been established forever, but now it's not going to continue, and God has sought a man after his own heart. It says that Saul just numbered the people that were present with him. Mm-hmm. So, there's no...
He went out and took a census.
Yeah. Well, I better figure out how many men we got. We still got to go to the battle here. Right. Whatever the prophet's saying, Mm-hmm. But you see what I'm saying here? No personal responsibility for what... Samuel brought some correction here.
Yeah.
He could have humbled himself and said, you know what, you're right.
Right.
I missed it here. What do we need to do to turn this situation around, right? Yeah. We don't see that. We just see him staying there numbering the people.
Well, and to what you're saying, he also just, basically said, well, it was the people's fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or it was the Philistines because they were putting pressure on me. So nasty Philistines, they caused the whole thing anyway,
Right.
Blame, it's like with Saul, we consistently see him shifting responsibility. Deflecting, shifting.
Blame game.
Yeah, there's never real ownership for his own actions, right? And he rationalized his compromise. He justified his disobedience. He never accepts real responsibility, and he doesn't really display any humility or accountability with his spiritual elder here. Mm-hmm. I don't even say him, Samuel. I don't like what you're saying. Can we do something here? Is there a way to turn this around? Right.
Well, what we're seeing in this is a basic he's basically devoid of the fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
Really.
That's a good point.
And what I mean is the fear of the Lord is not where you're standing before God, trembling in your boots, thinking he's going to strike you dead at any moment.
Right.
That's not the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is what we call a holy respect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
for his position in the universe. I mean, I know that sounds simplistic, but
well, he is God.
He's God. He's the Almighty. I mean,
Yes,
there's no other God above him. And what we see here is a blatant disregard for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like, well, whatever.
Thanks for helping me out with the words.
Well, I can see where you're going with that one.
But that's what's missing here.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between him and David.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to see.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's go to our next passage here. I'll read this one. It's a little lengthy. So we're going to be going to see
1 Samuel 15.
Yeah, 1 Samuel
1
15.
through 35.
All right, so I'll read this one. It's lengthy. So Samuel also said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. The Lord, thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now, go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." That's thorough. Mm-hmm. So Saul gathered the people together, numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and lay in wait in a valley. Then Saul said, "The Kenites, go, depart, get down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt." So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. And Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He also took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were unwilling to utterly destroy them. But everything despised and worthless, that they utterly destroyed. Now the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, "I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments." And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all night. So when Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, it was told Samuel, saying, "Saul went to Carmel, and indeed he set up a monument for himself, and he has gone on around and passed by and gone down to Gilgal." And then Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, "Blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord." But Samuel said,
"What a lie." What a blatant lie.
Now it's going so well. But Samuel said, "What then is the bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear?" That rhymes, you notice?
Yes.
And Saul said, "They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. And the rest we have utterly destroyed." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Be quiet. I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night." And he said to him, "Speak on." So Samuel said, "When you were little in your own eyes, were you not the head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? Now the Lord sent you on a mission and said, 'Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed.' Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you swoop down on the spoil and do evil in the sight of the Lord?" And Saul said to Samuel, "But I have obeyed the voice of the Lord and gone on the mission which the Lord sent me, and brought back Agag, king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the plunder, sheep and oxen, and the best of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal." So Samuel said, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as the iniquity and idolatry. And because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. And then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Now, therefore, please pardon my sin. Return with me that I may worship the Lord. But Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. And as Samuel turned around to go away, Saul seized the edge of his robe, and it tore. So Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. And also the strength of Israel will not lie nor relent, for he is not a man that he should relent. Then he said, I have sinned, yet honor me now, please, before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me that I may worship the Lord your God. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul worshiped the Lord. Then Samuel said, bring Agag, king of the Amalekites, here to me. So Agag came to him cautiously. And Agag said, surely the bitterness of death is past. But Samuel said, as your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house at Gibeah of Saul. And Samuel went no more to see Saul until the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. It's a long story right here.
A long, bloody story.
It's a difficult read because there's so much in this.
Yeah.
And once again, I said this to you right before we started this, Pat, that really in the first story, we sort of see the seedbed of what's going on with Saul. But in this one, it's like the Lord just takes the magnifying glass and just says, okay, let me really show you what's really going on here.
Yeah.
And by this time, we're seeing now not just the seeds, but we're seeing the full-grown fruit, the trees,
right.
The whole consequences of what he started out doing in the first story. Now it's really coming into fruition, and it's not a very pretty picture.
Full-blown manifestation of what he was lacking.
Yeah.
Right. And that, again, we see where his leadership skills, such as they were, not show up.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Should have taken leadership at this point.
Yeah.
No, he's not going to do that.
Yeah.
Going with the people again.
Blaming the people again.
Right.
So here he got corrected on this once.
Yeah. Then he does it again.
Did not take it to heart.
2 chapters later, he's doing it again.
Same thing again.
And so what we have is an established pattern.
Yeah.
Okay. And God does pay attention. A lot of people don't realize this. God pays attention.
Yeah.
To the not so good patterns in our lives. It's not just the good patterns, but the not so good.
Yeah. And
those are the ones he goes to work on, of course, because we are under, we're no longer under law, we're under grace. But it's not good to be testing God in these areas.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, you said a minute ago, to your point, there was a lot of insecurity with Saul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that we both have observed over the years in different church situations and ministerial situations and people that we've connected with in ministry, those who are immature are typically insecure.
Yeah.
They kind of go together.
Well, it also speaks of another thing is they don't realize, when God puts you in a function, I don't like saying position.
Okay, yeah.
But when God puts you in a function, because you can have people in position all day long, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
There's no manifestation of function, right? Just because they're in a position.
They have the title. Yeah.
Right. They got the title going. They've got the the shingle out.
Right. The business card.
The business card. That doesn't mean there's any function.
Right.
Okay. But when we see this, when God puts people in position, he requires them to follow through.
Right.
Okay. And what you've got here is it's immaturity, but it's lack of their confidence in that function that he put him in that role that he put him in.
I see what you're saying.
With Saul especially.
Yeah.
He's not exhibiting any confidence because he's still looking to himself.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm the one that he's not looking to God.
Right.
I am the one that's got to have the wisdom. I've got to have the, and when you're looking to yourself, you're always going to hit a dead end.
Right.
He should have been looking to God for the leadership qualities.
Yeah.
To be expressed to him. He should have been looking to God for all of this stuff that he needed to have in place, and not just looking to himself.
Yeah, and to your point, if God picked him, which obviously he did, God saw some things in Saul.
Mm-hmm.
He saw the potential in Saul.
Yeah.
He saw that if Saul responded to him, if Saul responded by developing his relationship with the Lord and learning to mature out of some of his immature characteristics, he could become a great leader.
Yeah.
Because God did not call him to do something he wasn't capable of doing.
Right.
And the reality is he did still rise up and become a leader. It took him some time, but he went a different route.
Right.
Instead of really, to your point a minute ago, learning to receive that grace and that empowerment and that vision that God had for him, he went to his own resources, and ultimately it led to his downfall. I think it's also interesting that when he's talking to Samuel about the Lord, he says, "The Lord your God."
Mm-hmm.
I think that's telling.
Very telling.
It's kind of like he's saying, well, the people are a big part of the problem here. And really the Lord, your God, is not making things easy for me here.
Right.
And so, what's Saul doing here? Still not accepting personal responsibility for his actions and no real accountability. I mean, he's standing right there in front of his spiritual authority who's calling him.
Well, to what you said earlier, it's all about the deflection, right?
Right. The deflecting, the blaming, it goes all the way back to the garden, right?
Right.
Adam blaming Eve and Eve blaming the serpent,
right.
etc.
Right.
Adam blaming God and the woman. Okay. Nothing new there. But the problem is that if we don't grow out of these tendencies, we will fail the test of leadership.
Right.
And then you're going to have ministers that fall because of not understanding that this crucible is something God will put us through.
Yeah.
We're going to go through the refining process.
Well, it's all about character or lack of it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we cut corners. When God goes to work on our character, somehow we tend to cut corners on that.
Yeah.
And we don't allow those areas to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Lord knows this stuff's going to show up later.
Yeah.
But still, you got to understand something. He goes out of his way to try to make sure that this stuff is dealt with in private before you're set into a public function.
Yeah.
Okay. But if he has to, he'll let it go that way.
Yeah. Obviously, it's not his best.
No, not at all.
Because, one of the reasons why we were impressed by the Lord to do this whole series is because when ministers fall, it brings damage.
It does.
There's collateral damage with the body of Christ. Right. The Lord's name is reproached. The gospel is reproached, right? And it hurts everybody.
It does.
It's a no-win situation. The body of Christ does not win from this. Certainly the fallen minister doesn't.
No.
Souls don't get won. People that had a relationship with the Lord lose their grip in God sometimes.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing. Never allow somebody's downfall to yank the spiritual rug out from underneath you. Otherwise, if that's going on, you've got the wrong foundation.
Well, I think
altogether.
To your point there, the focus is in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
If we have our eyes on the Lord, yes, Paul did say, "Follow me," but as I follow Christ, and be imitators of Christ, right? So there is a point where God puts elders and leaders in our lives, and they are to be an example to us. They are to lead the way for us, and we can even navigate our lives in some ways. But we cannot put them in the place of God.
Yeah.
We can't do that. And unfortunately, that happens all too frequently. The human tendency is to elevate men and then let men carry the role of leadership.
Yeah. I remember when the Lord first started talking to me about doing a video podcast and all this mess. I was scared of it because I didn't understand any of the technology.
Yeah.
Technology. I used to have a good handle on the technology because I used to run camera for Ken Hagin and stuff like this at the school of ministry or healing school rather, and all this. And at one time I ran camera for Shambach. One time I had a good handle on technology, but it's advanced so far.
Oh yeah,
it's gone crazy to wireless and
way
Bluetooth, and all that. Where you don't run a cable anywhere, and quite frankly, it scared me. I was intimidated by it.
Sure,
it delayed my obedience in this area, and the Lord said, "Look, I'm trying to get some personal growth out of you in this area."
A little stretching there.
Yeah, a lot of stretching, And it's like, and now I'm running 4 of these things. Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's out of the frying pan into the fire. But God was not smiling on my disobedience, my delayed obedience, which was actually disobedience, and it nearly cost me my life.
Mm-hmm.
And He made that very plain when I wound up in heaven over it.
Yeah.
And so then I knew I had to get with the program. So here we are.
Here we are. Listen, we're going to need to wrap this up, Pat. But let me say this real quick because we're going to go look at David's life in a minute. We want to do compare and contrast on this. But let's remember what the Lord said through Samuel about Saul's disobedience. He said he was guilty of rebellion and stubbornness. He said he was guilty of iniquity and idolatry. It's very serious.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at David's life, we're going to see he had some sin issues as well. And when you go comparing them, it almost looks like David's hit list was quite a bit more on the higher side than Saul's.
Right.
But we have to see it through God's eyes. What David did was serious in the eyes of the Lord, but he had a different kind of heart. And the Lord said that here about him when he was speaking to Saul through Samuel. But what we see here is God's really putting the magnifying glass on Saul's heart. And he's saying, this is why I've rejected you. Because you reject me. Because you reject my word. Because you reject my authority, my commandments. And why? Because you have a rebellious heart. Because you have a stubbornness. And that's a form of idolatry. That's witchcraft. And that's going to disqualify you unless you humble yourself and get with me and let me start working on these areas of your life.
I just want to throw this in there. When God is dealing with stubbornness, He's not going to deliver us of stubbornness. I've learned this.
Yeah.
I asked God one time, why aren't you removing things out of my life that displeases you?
Right.
He says, I'm not.
No.
He says, those are the areas I want to sanctify.
Yeah.
Man, that was a revelation to me. I was like, sanctify?
Yeah.
What? What do you mean sanctify? This stuff stinks in your nostrils and you want to sanctify it? You want to leave it? Do you want to leave it to stink?
Yeah.
He says, no. He says, you give it to me and I will do a work and it will sanctify. Yeah. And what was once stubbornness in the flesh will become a stubbornness for good, a stubbornness.
Yeah.
I talked to the Lord, why don't you get rid of my ego? He says, no, I can't.
Yeah.
And he began to teach me the difference between pride and ego. They're not the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. He says, I want to sanctify your ego because that's the leadership part that I put in you.
Right.
And you need that. And you need that.
You need that.
Right.
To your point that the stubbornness, when it's redeemed, right, and sanctified, it gives us perseverance.
Yeah. Major perseverance.
Which we need.
In the face of all odds, I got a healthy dose of it. Right. I saw it rise up in me when I was on my deathbed, fighting for my life every day for 4 months.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually longer than that. But people were asking, how in the world are you even still alive? Stubbornness.
Right. Which was really perseverance.
Perseverance, right.
You saw the end of the tunnel. There was a light and you saw the end and you told yourself, if I just keep going, I'll get there.
I'll get there.
And so, I mean, stubbornness is like the negative word,
Yeah.
right? Perseverance is more biblical, or
Yeah.
endurance, right?
Yeah.
It's that unwillingness to give up. It's that push, that drive to press through. I will see this thing through.
Yeah.
And not in my own energy, but by the grace of
Yeah.
God.
And I knew it wasn't going to be a forever thing.
Right.
That's one of the things that kept me going was I knew this too shall pass.
Yeah. It's
You
not
know.
a life sentence.
It's not a life sentence. I'm not bound to this bed.
Yeah.
I will get off of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I went through 5 major, in a point of 2.5 years, I went through 5 major surgeries, all of it abdominal. The shortest one was 8 hours.
Oof.
Okay.
Yeah.
Went on life support and all that numerous times, you know, the whole kit and caboodle. And it was, a combination of the prayers of the saints
Right.
praying for me. I can never pay you back for what you guys did, praying me through that process. Combination of that, and this thing rose up on the inside of me. Pat, you're going to make this and you will not die.
Amen.
Even though my body was trying to die.
Yeah.
I mean, laying there day and night for days, and I'd stop breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And the alarms start going off, and the Lord would wake me up and say, audibly tell me, breathe. Pat, breathe. I don't know how many times I heard that.
Sorry.
Because my body would literally try to shut down.
Yeah. We need to cover this
But anyway.
again in the future, but we're going to wrap this up. So just real quick, guys, just remember this. Saul really did not accept personal responsibility for his actions or personal accountability. And you cannot be restored if you're fallen, if you're not taking those steps. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You're just going to short circuit the process, and you will be walking around the mountain
Again,
not making any progress. So please take these things to heart. We're sharing this because we believe these are the directions the Lord gave us for those who have experienced a fall and they need to go through the restoration process. We're going to wrap this up. In our next broadcast, we're going to talk about David and do a deep dive on his life and find out, what he did and the process he went through. But until then, we want to thank you guys for being with us today on Two Witnesses broadcast. We want you to know this, that we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. We also have some shorts on Instagram. We have a website, or not a website, an email address, twowitnessesbroadcast@gmail.com. That's twowitnessesbroadcast@gmail.com. Also, if you like the program, we would love to hear from you. You can email us there if you have a prayer request or just want to share some thoughts about this. You can also comment in the comment section down below on YouTube. All of those things are available. And if you've been blessed by the program, press that share, press that like, send it on to your friends, your viewers. And it always helps us build the channel if you become a subscriber. So until we see you again, we want to thank you for being with us. And we are
Two Witnesses.
Two Witnesses.